Breaking news. Please stand by for another C2C World News Now current event. Hello, today is Wednesday, and this is the 5th day of October 2016.
Right now, turning midday in Moscow, you're watching RT International. From all of us here, thanks for joining us. Washington is considering military strikes against Syria's government, according to media reports citing U.S. government sources. That's after America severed talks with Russia over the Syrian peace process. The U.S. Secretary of State has once again blamed Washington's favorite scapegoat for the escalation in the conflict.
You also have the irresponsible and profoundly ill-advised decision by Russia to associate its interests and its reputation with that of Assad, a man who has been responsible for torturing more than 10,000 people, photographs of the victims, as well as perpetrating this extraordinary slaughter of his own people.
Well, the motto, Assad must go, has been a mainstay of the West's rhetoric. Now the White House says it understands potential attacks on President Assad's forces will bring Russia and the U.S. closer to conflict.
There's a risk associated with taking strikes at regime targets. That risk includes attacking a regime that does continue to maintain a robust air defense system. It also edges U.S. and Russian military forces closer to confrontation. It doesn't serve anybody's interest.
Well, America's decision to cut ties with Russia on ceasefire negotiations has hampered the peace process in Syria. Washington blamed Moscow for being ineffective in the fight against ISIL. In reaction, Russia said the U.S. appears ready to strike a deal with the devil to achieve its aims in Syria. And we asked the U.S. State Department what happens next as diplomacy gets put on the back burner.
I went to ask the State Department what led to the failure of diplomacy.
Didn't it fail after some rebel groups, specifically al-Sham in Aleppo, used the ceasefire to strengthen their positions? Didn't it fail after ISIL nearly took over Deir ez-Zor following the U.S. bombing of the Syrian military, admittedly by mistake? Did those things play no role in the failure of that deal?
There was a series of events, certainly the attack by mistake on Syrian forces, but then followed by the attack on the humanitarian convoy, and then subsequently by an increase in attacks on civilian targets in Aleppo. Look, we can talk all about the fact that some rebel groups or some opposition groups may have used the pause to resupply. That's a reality.
When questioned on the events that preceded the collapse of the deal, the State Department does concede, kind of half-heartedly, that the rebels had a role to play. But Washington's predominant narrative is that Russia and Assad suddenly rejected diplomacy and chose a military solution. Interesting that Secretary Kerry himself at one time argued for a military action against the Syrian government, as he told members of the Syrian opposition last week in a conversation that was leaked. He said he lost that argument and proceeded with President Obama's policy. On the question about whether everyone on the U.S. side was on the same page when negotiating the deal with Russia, here's what the State Department said today.
You said that the interagency process is very effective and creates a single policy. Isn't the idea once the president makes up his mind and decides on the policy that the dissenters shut up and don't complain publicly about?
Precisely. I mean, that's
did that happen in this case?
Again, on a policy and an issue as like Syria, I mean, you know, any given day, there's different elements and different dynamics to be considered, and I think that that always goes into. Yes.
Did it create a single policy with no dissent?
Yes.
Okay, it did, because there were a lot of people complaining about it.
I understand that there's
not secretly, not the whispering in the background.
I understand that there's a perception of that. But what I would say is that
doesn't that compromise the effectiveness of this?
Again, you know, we carried out the policy that the president had dictated.
Media reports now say the Obama administration is again considering military action. And we may once again see a divergence of views within the administration on how to proceed in Syria.
This has been a C2C World News Now current event. Stay safe, everyone.